Captain Jiwan walked through the crowded halls of Station Nexus 7, trying not to show how nervous he felt. This was his first big mission as a captain, and he wanted everything to go perfectly. The space station was huge, bigger than any human city he had ever seen. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved around him, some floating, some walking on multiple legs, others sliding along the metal floors. "Stay close," he told his team through his communicator. "We don't want to get lost in this place." Behind him, Engineer Minho was looking at everything with wide eyes. He had worked on alien technology before, but he had never seen so many different species in one place. Next to him, xenobiologist Hana was taking notes on her tablet, trying to record every new creature she saw. "Captain," Hana said quietly, "some of these species aren't in our databases. We're seeing things that humans have never encountered before." Jiwan nodded. That was exactly why they were here. The Galactic Trade Consortium had finally agreed to meet with human representatives. After years of trying to make contact, humanity was getting its first real chance to join the galactic community. The main corridor of the station stretched out before them like a metal canyon. Shops and stalls lined both sides, selling everything from strange foods to glowing crystals to weapons that hummed with energy. The air smelled like a mixture of metals, spices, and things Jiwan couldn't identify. "Look at that," Minho whispered, pointing to a stall where a blue-skinned alien was selling what looked like bottled lightning. "How do they even contain electricity like that?" "We can study the technology later," Jiwan replied. "Right now we need to focus on finding the meeting point." But as they walked deeper into the station, Jiwan heard something that made him stop. It was a sound that didn't belong in this place of advanced technology and alien voices. It was the sound of an animal in distress. The sound came from a side corridor that led to what looked like a marketplace. Jiwan could see colorful banners hanging from the ceiling and hear the voices of many different species talking at once. But underneath all that noise, he could still hear the animal crying. "Captain," Hana said, looking at her tablet, "our meeting isn't for another hour. We have some time." Jiwan looked toward the marketplace, then back at his team. Something about that sound bothered him. It reminded him of the cats he had grown up with on Earth, but there was something different about it. Something that spoke of intelligence and desperation. "Let's take a quick look," he said. They walked into the marketplace and Jiwan's eyes widened. He had thought the main corridor was crowded, but this place was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Tall, thin aliens with too many arms bargained with short, round creatures covered in fur. Beings made of what looked like living crystal. Examined goods held by merchants with scales and sharp teeth. The animal sounds were coming from the far end of the marketplace. Jiwan pushed through the crowd, following the noise. As they got closer, he could see a group of aliens gathered around something, talking loudly and making gestures with their hands, claws, and tentacles. When they finally reached the source of the noise, Jiwan felt his heart sink. In the center of the crowd was a large metal cage, and inside the cage was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was clearly feline, but larger than any cat from Earth. Its fur was pure white, so white it almost seemed to glow under the station's lights. Its eyes were the brightest blue Jiwan had ever seen, and they were filled with intelligence and anger. The creature was beautiful, but it was also clearly terrified and furious. "What is that?" Minho asked, staring at the caged animal. An alien standing nearby heard the question. It was tall and thin, with green skin and eyes like a snake. "That is a Vorthak," it said in accented but clear English. "Very rare, very valuable, and very stubborn." Jiwan watched as another alien approached the cage. This one was huge, with red scales and sharp claws. It reached toward the cage, probably trying to touch the creature inside. The white cat immediately hissed and swiped at the bars with its paw. The scaled alien pulled back quickly, making angry noises. "See?" the green alien said. "No one can touch it. No one can make it obey. It has been like this for weeks." "What's going to happen to it?" Hana asked. The green alien, who seemed to be the auctioneer, smiled in a way that made Jiwan uncomfortable. "Someone will buy it eventually. There are ways to make any animal obey if you know what you are doing." Ji-won felt sick. He watched as more aliens approached the cage, each one trying to intimidate or frighten the creature into submission. Some made loud noises, others showed their teeth or claws, and a few even brought out devices that sparked with electricity. But the white cat refused to give in. Every time an alien got close, it would hiss, spit, and swipe at them. Its blue eyes never showed fear, only defiance. It was like watching a small piece of pure courage trapped in a cage. "This is wrong," Ji-won said quietly. "What did you say?" the auctioneer asked. "I said this is wrong," Ji-won repeated louder this time. "That creature is clearly intelligent. Look at its eyes. Look at how it responds to different situations. It's not just an animal." Several aliens in the crowd turned to look at the humans. Some seemed amused, others appeared annoyed. A few looked curious about what these strange new beings might do. "Humans," one of them said, the word sounding like an insult. "You are new here. You do not understand how things work." "Maybe we don't," Ji-won said, still watching the caged creature. "But we understand what's right and what's wrong." The white cat had stopped hissing and was now looking directly at Ji-won. Its bright blue eyes seemed to be studying him, as if it was trying to figure out what kind of being he was. For a moment, the two of them just stared at each other across the crowded marketplace. Ji-won felt something strange happen in that moment. It was like a connection had formed between him and the creature. He could see the intelligence in its eyes, the pride that refused to be broken, and the loneliness of being the only one of its kind in a place full of strangers. "How much?" he asked suddenly. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. "Ah, so the human is interested. The bidding starts at 50,000 credits. Ji-won's heart sank. That was more money than his entire team's mission budget. But as he looked at the creature in the cage, he knew he couldn't just walk away. Something about this situation was wrong, and he was going to find a way to make it right. The white cat was still looking at him, and Ji-won could swear he saw something like hope in those bright blue eyes. The auction was getting louder and more violent by the minute. Ji-won watched as alien after alien tried to approach the white creature's cage, and each time the result was the same. The beautiful cat would hiss, swipe, and refuse to back down. Its bright blue eyes never showed fear, only pure defiance. "Tell me more about this species," Ji-won said to Hana, keeping his voice low so the other bidders wouldn't hear. Hana quickly pulled up information on her tablet. According to the galactic database, they're called Vorthak. They come from a planet in the Sigma Quadrant that was destroyed about 30 years ago in a mining accident. The species is listed as extinct in the wild. "Extinct?" Minho whispered. "You mean this might be the last one?" "It's possible," Hana said, reading more from her device. They were known for being extremely intelligent, almost as smart as some of the lower-level sapient species. They were also known for being impossible to tame or domesticate. Ji-won looked back at the cage. The white cat was sitting calmly now, but its ears were turned toward their conversation. It was listening to them talk. "Look," he said quietly. "It's understanding us." "That's impossible," said a voice behind them. They turned to see a large alien with red scales and burning yellow eyes. "I am Lord Krex of the Draconian Empire. I have been trying to acquire a Vorthak for my collection for years. They are animals, nothing more." Lord Krex was enormous, at least 8 feet tall, with claws that looked like they could cut through metal. His voice was deep and threatening, and when he spoke, other aliens in the marketplace stepped back to give him room. "Animals don't usually understand conversations," Ji-won said calmly. Lord Krex laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "You humans are so soft. You see intelligence where there is only instinct. This creature will make an excellent fighter in my arena. The crowds love to watch proud beasts learn humility." "Fighter?" Hana asked, her voice shocked. "Of course," Lord Krex said. "I breed and train creatures from across the galaxy to fight for entertainment. This one's spirit will be perfect for the arena, once it learns to obey." Ji-won felt anger building in his chest. He looked at the white cat again and saw that it was now staring directly at Lord Krex. The creature's fur was standing up along its back, and its lips were pulled back to show sharp white teeth. It clearly understood what the Draconian was saying. The bidding has reached 80,000 credits, the green auctioneer announced. Do I hear 90? 100,000. Lord Crex called out without hesitation. The crowd went quiet. That was an enormous amount of money, more than most beings made in several years. Jiwan felt his heart sink. There was no way his team could match that kind of bid. But then something unexpected happened. The white cat made a sound that Jiwan had never heard before. It wasn't a hiss or a growl. It was softer, almost like it was trying to speak. The creature was looking directly at him, and its bright blue eyes seemed to be pleading. Captain, Minho said quietly, we can't afford to bid against a draconian lord. We'll cause a diplomatic incident. I know, Jiwan said, but he couldn't look away from the creature's eyes. Lord Crex noticed the exchange and smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The human seems attached to my new pet. Perhaps I will let you visit it in the arena, human. You can watch it learn proper respect for its betters. The white cat suddenly stood up in its cage and walked to the side closest to Jiwan. It sat down and continued staring at him, completely ignoring all the other aliens around the cage. The creature tilted its head to one side like it was asking a question. 150,000, Lord Crex announced, clearly wanting to end the auction quickly. Wait, Jiwan said suddenly. The entire marketplace turned to look at him. I want to try something first. What are you doing? Hana whispered. I don't know, Jiwan admitted. But I have to try. He walked slowly toward the cage, ignoring the murmurs from the crowd. Most of the aliens were laughing or making jokes about the foolish human who thought he could succeed where others had failed. But Jiwan wasn't trying to intimidate or frighten the creature. Instead, he did something that none of the aliens had tried. He knelt down in front of the cage, making himself smaller and less threatening. Then he slowly extended his hand toward the bars, palm up, in a gesture of offering rather than demanding. What is he doing? Someone in the crowd asked. Humans are so weak, another voice said. He thinks he can make friends with a wild beast. But the white cat had gone completely still. It was staring at Jiwan's outstretched hand with an expression that looked almost like surprise. Slowly, carefully, the creature stood up and walked. Toward the bars, the entire marketplace fell silent. Even the background noise of the space station seemed to fade away. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. The white cat reached the bars and stopped just inches from Jiwan's hand. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, so gently that Jiwan barely felt it, the creature stretched out its paw and touched his fingers. The crowd exploded in shocked voices. Aliens were talking in dozens of different languages, all expressing amazement at what they had just seen. No one had ever seen a Vorthak willingly touch another being. Lord Crex pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with anger. What did you do to it? He demanded. Nothing, Jiwan said honestly. I just offered friendship instead of dominance. The white cat was still touching his hand, and now it was making that soft sound again. It almost sounded like purring, but deeper and more complex. The creature's bright blue eyes were fixed on Jiwan's face, and for the first time since he had seen it, the cat looked peaceful. This changes nothing, Lord Crex snarled. The creature is still mine. 200,000 credits. But now, other aliens in the crowd were murmuring among themselves. They had seen something impossible happen, and they were starting to look at the humans with new interest. If these beings could do something that no other species had managed, maybe they were worth paying attention to after all. The bidding war that followed was unlike anything Jiwan had ever seen. Word had spread quickly through the marketplace that a human had somehow made contact with the impossible Vorthak. And now aliens from all over the station were arriving to see what was happening. 250,000, called out a crystalline being that sparkled like a living diamond. 300,000, countered a merchant with tentacles instead of arms. Lord Crex's yellow eyes were burning with anger, but he kept raising his bid. 500,000 credits, he announced. And I want the human too. Clearly they work as a pair. Jiwan felt his blood turn cold. I'm not for sale, he said firmly, Everything is for sale in the right circumstances, Lord Krex replied with a dangerous smile. You have interfered with my purchase. In draconian law, that makes you part of the transaction. Minho stepped closer to his captain. Sir, we need to get out of here. This is getting dangerous. But Jiwan couldn't leave. The white cat was still pressed against the bars of its cage, still touching his hand. Every few seconds it would make that soft purring sound, and its blue eyes never left his face. The creature trusted him, and he couldn't abandon it now. Captain, Hana said urgently, I've been checking our diplomatic funds. We have enough credits for emergencies, but not enough to match these bids. The auctioneer was getting excited as the numbers kept climbing. 600,000 from Lord Krex. Do I hear 700? Wait, Jiwan said loudly. I want to challenge this entire auction. The marketplace went quiet again. Lord Krex took a step toward the human, his claws extended. You dare to challenge me? I'm not challenging you, Jiwan said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm challenging the legality of this auction under Galactic Trade Consortium law. The auctioneer looked confused. What are you talking about, human? Jiwan pulled out his tablet and quickly searched through the legal databases that all diplomatic teams carried. His hands were shaking, but he found what he was looking for. According to Consortium Trade Law, Section 47, Paragraph 12, no sapient being can be sold as property, he read aloud. The definition of sapient includes any being capable of complex problem-solving, emotional responses, and communication. That creature is not sapient, Lord Krex said angrily. It's an animal. Look at it, Jiwan said, pointing to the cage. Really look at it. It understands our conversation. It responds to different people in different ways. It made a choice to trust me. Those are not the actions of a simple animal. The white cat seemed to understand what Jiwan was trying to do. It moved away from the bars and walked to the center of its cage. Then, to everyone's amazement, it sat down and placed one paw over the other, in a position that looked almost like it was waiting patiently. See? Jiwan said. It's listening to our legal discussion and responding appropriately. Several aliens in the crowd began talking among themselves. A few were nodding their heads, as if they were starting to agree with the human's argument. But Lord Krex was not convinced. Laws can be changed, he said darkly. Humans are new to galactic society. You don't understand how things really work here. Maybe we don't understand how things work, Jiwan admitted. But we understand right from wrong. The white cat suddenly stood up and walked back to the bars. But this time, instead of reaching for Jiwan's hand, it did something even more surprising. It looked directly at Lord Krex and made a sound that was clearly a challenge. Not a frightened hiss, but a sound that said it would never surrender to him. Then the creature turned back to Jiwan and made the soft purring sound again. The message was clear to everyone watching. The Vorthak was choosing who it wanted to trust. This is ridiculous, Lord Krex said. I don't care what some human thinks about our laws, that creature belongs to me. Actually, said a new voice, the human might have a point. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was an official from the Trade Consortium, dressed in the formal robes of a legal arbitrator. The alien was tall and thin, with silver skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything. I am Arbitrator Zenth, the official said. I was called here because of reports of an unusual auction. Having observed this creature's behavior, I believe a formal intelligence assessment is required before any sale can continue. Lord Krex's face twisted with rage. You cannot be serious. Consortium law is very clear on this matter. Arbitrator Zenth replied calmly. If there is reasonable doubt about a being's sapience, the sale must be suspended pending investigation. The white cat seemed to understand what was happening. It walked to the front of its cage and sat down, looking at the arbitrator with what could only be described as hope. How long will this investigation take? The auctioneer asked nervously. As long as necessary, Arbitrator Zenth said. In the meantime, the creature will be held in protective custody, not as property but as a potentially free being. Jiwan felt a surge of relief, But he knew this was only the beginning. Lord Krex was glaring at him with obvious hatred, and other aliens in the crowd were muttering about humans causing trouble. The white cat pressed against the bars again and touched Jiwan's hand once more. This time the touch felt different. It felt like gratitude. "Thank you," Jiwan whispered, so quietly that only the creature could hear. The cat tilted its head and made a sound that was almost like a whisper in return. For a moment, Jiwan could have sworn it was trying to say thank you back. As arbitrator Zenth began making arrangements for the creature's temporary care, Jiwan realized that everything had changed. They had come to the station as simple diplomats, but now they were involved in a legal case that could change how the entire galaxy thought about intelligence and freedom. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if the white cat had planned this all along. The next 3 days were the most stressful of Jiwan's life. While lawyers and officials from dozens of alien species argued about the case, he spent every free moment he could with the white cat. The creature had been moved to a better facility, more like a comfortable room than a cage, but it was still confined. Jiwan had started calling the cat Beck, which meant white in Korean. The name seemed to fit, and somehow the creature appeared to like it. Every time Jiwan said the name, Beck's ears would perk up and it would look directly at him. "You're getting attached," Hana warned him as they walked toward Beck's temporary quarters. "Maybe," Jiwan admitted. "But look at what we've learned already." It was true. In just 3 days, Beck had shown intelligence that amazed everyone who observed it. The creature could solve complex puzzles, understood cause and effect, and even seemed to grasp basic mathematical concepts. When shown pictures of different objects, Beck could group them by category or function. Most impressive of all, Beck had begun to communicate, not with words, but with a system of sounds and gestures that clearly had meaning. One sound meant yes, another meant no. A specific movement of its tail indicated curiosity, while a particular way of sitting showed contentment. "The test results are incredible," Hana said, checking her tablet. "Beck's problem-solving abilities are higher than some species that are already recognized as fully sapient." When they arrived at Bayek's room, they found the cat sitting by the door as if it had been waiting for them. Its bright blue eyes lit up when it saw Jiwan, and it made the soft, purring sound that had become their greeting. "Hello, Bayek," Jiwan said, kneeling down to the creature's level. "How are you feeling today?" Beck walked over and gently touched Jiwan's hand with its paw. Then it looked toward the corner of the room where its food had been placed and made a quick sound that clearly meant no. "You're not hungry?" Jiwan asked. Beck shook its head, and gesture it had learned from watching the humans. Then it walked to the window that looked out onto the station's main corridor and made a longer, more complex sound. "I think it wants to go outside," Minho said. "It's been cooped up in here for days." Jiwan wished he could help, but the legal proceedings required Beck to stay in protective custody until the case was resolved. "I'm sorry," he told the cat. "We're trying to help you, but these things take time." Beck seemed to understand. It made a sad sound and walked back to sit beside Jiwan. The creature leaned against his leg, seeking comfort. "Captain," Hana said quietly, "there's something else. Lord Krex has been asking questions about our mission here. He's trying to find ways to pressure us into dropping the case." Jiwan wasn't surprised. The Draconian Lord had made it clear that he considered the humans his enemies now. "What kind of questions?" "About our trade agreements, our technology, our military capabilities," Hana replied. "He's also been spreading rumors that humans are troublemakers who don't respect galactic law. But we're the ones trying to follow the law," Minho protested. "That's not how he's telling it," Hana said. "He's saying that we're using legal tricks to steal his rightful property." Beck was listening to their conversation with obvious interest. The cat's ears were turned toward them, and its head moved back and forth as each person spoke, like it was following a tennis match. Suddenly, Beck stood up and walked to the center of the room. It sat down and made a series of different sounds, each one clear and distinct. Then it looked directly at Jiwan and tilted its head. "I think it's trying to tell us something," Jiwan said. Beck repeated the sounds, but this time it pointed with its paw toward the door, then toward Ji-won, then toward itself. It wants to come with us, Hana said with amazement. It's asking to be part of our team. That's impossible, Minho said. It's an animal. Animals don't volunteer for things. But Beck was already proving him wrong. The creature walked over to Ji-won's tablet, which he had left on a table, and carefully pushed it toward him with its nose. Then it sat down and waited. I think it wants to see the legal documents, Ji-won said slowly. He pulled up the case files on his tablet and held the screen where Beck could see it. The cat studied the text for several minutes, its blue eyes moving across the words as if it was actually reading. Then Beck did something that made everyone in the room go silent. It reached out with one paw and touched a specific paragraph on the screen. It was the section about the rights of sapient beings to choose their own destiny. It understands, Hana whispered. It actually understands what we're fighting for. Beck made a confident sound and nodded its head. Then it walked to each of the humans in turn and touched their hands gently, as if it was thanking them. We have to win this case, Ji-won said firmly. Not just for Beck, but for every intelligent being who might face this same situation in the future. That evening, as they prepared for the final day of legal arguments, Ji-won received an unexpected visitor. Arbitrator Zenth arrived at their quarters with news. The case has attracted attention from across the galaxy, the official said. Representatives from over 50 species are coming to observe the final ruling. Is that good or bad? Ji-won asked. That depends on the outcome, Zenth replied. If we rule that the Vorthak is sapient, it will set a precedent that could change how all species interact with each other. If we rule against it, Lord Krex gets his fighting animal, Ji-won finished. More than that, Zenth said gravely. It will send a message that intelligence alone is not enough to guarantee freedom. That power and money matter more than rights. Ji-won thought about Beck sitting alone in its room, waiting to learn whether it would live as a free being or die in an arena for entertainment. There's something else, Zenth continued. Your approach to this case has impressed many in the galactic community. The way you showed respect instead of dominance, the way you offered friendship instead of demanding submission. Some species are saying that humans might bring a new perspective to galactic relations. All we did was treat another intelligent being with kindness, Ji-won said. Exactly, Zenth replied. And that's what makes it so remarkable. As the arbitrator left, Ji-won realized that tomorrow would determine not just Bayek's future, but possibly the future of how humanity would be seen by the rest of the galaxy. Everything depended on whether they could prove that sometimes the greatest strength came not from force but from compassion, from... The hearing room was packed with representatives from species across the galaxy. Ji-won had never seen so many different types of beings in one place. Some were familiar from the marketplace, but others were completely new to him. There were beings, made of energy, creatures that looked like living plants, and aliens so strange that he couldn't even guess what they were. At the front of the room, Arbitrator Zenth sat behind a tall desk, flanked by two other legal officials. To one side, Lord Krex stood with his team of lawyers, all of them looking confident and aggressive. On the other side, Ji-won sat with his small human team, feeling very small and out of place. But the most important being in the room was Bayek. The white cat sat in a special enclosure that was open on top, not like a cage, but more like a comfortable platform. Beck was calm and alert, its bright blue eyes taking in everything around it. This hearing will determine the legal status of the being known as a Vorthak, Arbitrator Zenth announced. The question before us is simple. Is this creature a sapient, being with rights, or is it property to be bought and sold? Lord Krex's lead lawyer stood up first. She was a tall, intimidating alien with sharp features and a voice like breaking glass. The answer is obvious, she said. This creature is an animal. It may be intelligent, but so are many animals. Intelligence alone does not make a being sapient. She gestured toward Beck with one clawed hand. The Vorthak cannot speak our languages. It cannot write or create art or build cities. It lives by instinct, not reason. To claim that it deserves the same rights as truly sapient beings is absurd. Several aliens in the audience nodded their agreement. Ji-won felt his heart sink. The lawyer was making good points, and he wasn't sure how to argue against them. But then it was his turn to speak. Ji-won stood up slowly, his legs feeling weak. He had never given a speech to such an important audience, and he could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. "My name is Captain Ji-won of the Human Diplomatic Corps," he began. "I'm not a lawyer or a scientist. I'm just someone who has spent the last few days getting to know this remarkable being." He walked closer to Beck's platform. The cat looked up at him and made the soft purring sound that had become their greeting. "The lawyer is right that Beck cannot speak our languages," Ji-won continued. "But Beck has created its own language. It uses sounds and gestures to communicate complex ideas. It has learned to say yes and no, to express happiness and sadness, to ask questions and give answers." As if to prove his point, Beck stood up and walked to the edge of its platform. It looked directly at Lord Krex and made a sharp sound that clearly meant no. Then it turned to Ji-won and made the gentle purring sound that meant yes. "The lawyer says that Bayek cannot create art," Ji-won said. "But what is art except the expression of inner feelings? Watch this." He pulled out his tablet and showed Bayek a picture of a sunset from Earth. The cat studied the image for a moment, then began to move in a slow, graceful pattern around its platform. The movement was beautiful, like a dance that somehow captured the peace and beauty of the sunset. The audience watched in amazed silence. Even some of Lord Krex's supporters were looking impressed. "The lawyer says that Beck lives by instinct, not reason," Ji-won continued. "But every choice Bayek has made has been reasonable. When faced with beings who threatened it, Bayek defended itself. When offered kindness, Bayek responded with trust. When given the chance to learn, Bayek chose to grow." He paused and looked around, the room at all the different species watching him. "But the most important thing about Bayek is not its intelligence or its ability to communicate. The most important thing is that Beck makes choices." Ji-won walked back to his seat and picked up a key from the table. It was the key to Beck's enclosure, which had been given to him as a symbolic gesture. Right now, Beck is confined to this platform not because it has done anything wrong, but because we are deciding its fate, he said. "But what if we let Bayek decide for itself?" Arbitrator Zenth looked surprised. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we give Beck the same choice we would give any sapient being," Ji-won replied. "The choice to be free." He walked over to Beck's platform and held up the key. "This key opens your enclosure," he said to Beck. "If you are just an animal driven by instinct, you will run away as soon as I open it. But if you are a sapient being capable of making choices, you will decide for yourself what you want to do." The room was completely silent. Lord Krex was on his feet, objecting loudly, but Arbitrator Zenth motioned for him to be quiet. "This is highly irregular," the arbitrator said. "But the human makes an interesting point. Very well. Open the enclosure." Ji-won inserted the key and opened the door to Bayek's platform. The cat could now leave whenever it wanted. It could run away from the hearing, from the aliens, from all the beings who wanted to control its life. Bayek stood up and walked to the open door. For a moment it looked out at the room full of aliens, many of whom still saw it as nothing more than a valuable animal. Then Bayek did something that no one expected. Instead of running away, it walked calmly out of the enclosure and sat down, directly in front of Arbitrator Zenth's desk. It looked up at the judge and made a clear, confident sound. "I think," Arbitrator Zenth said slowly, "that the Vorthak is trying to participate in its own hearing." Beck nodded its head and made another sound. Then it did something even more amazing. It walked over to Lord Krex and sat down in front of him. For a long moment, the cat and the Draconian Lord stared at each other. Then Beck stood up, turned its back on Lord Krex, and walked away. The message was clear to everyone in the room. Beck was rejecting Lord Krex's claim of ownership. The cat walked back to Ji-won and sat down beside him. It looked up at the human and made the gentle purring sound that meant friendship and trust. "The choice has been made," Arbitrator Zenth announced. "A truly sapient being has been given freedom and has chosen to use that freedom to reject slavery and choose friendship." This court rules that the Vorthak is a free, sapient being with all the rights that entails. The room erupted in voices speaking dozens of different languages. Some aliens were cheering, others were arguing, and a few were already making plans to leave the station. Lord Krex was furious, but there was nothing he could do. The ruling was final, and Beck was officially free. But then came the question that Jiwan had been dreading. What would happen to Beck now? The cat was the last of its species, alone in a galaxy full of strangers. Arbitrator Zenth seemed to read his thoughts. The court must now determine where the Vorthak will live. As a free being, it has the right to choose its own path. Jiwan knelt down beside Beck and looked into those bright blue eyes. "You're free now," he said softly. "You can go anywhere you want, do anything you want. You don't owe me anything." Beck tilted its head and made a questioning sound. "We could find you a safe planet where you could live in peace," Jiwan continued. "Or we could help you find other beings who would treat you with respect. The choice is yours." For a long moment, Beck just stared at him. Then the cat did something that brought tears to Jiwan's eyes. Beck gently placed its paw in Jiwan's outstretched hand, just as it had done that first day in the marketplace. "I think," Jiwan said, his voice thick with emotion, "that Bayek wants to come with us." Bayek made the purring sound and nodded its head. The cat had made its choice. It wanted to stay with the beings who had shown it kindness and respect. As they left the hearing room together, Jiwan realized that everything had changed. Beck was no longer a prisoner or a piece of property. The cat was a free being who had chosen friendship over fear, trust over suspicion, and throughout the galaxy, other species were taking notice. The humans had done something that no one else had thought to try. They had offered respect instead of dominance, choice instead of control. It was the beginning of a new understanding between the species of the galaxy. And it had all started with a simple gesture of friendship between a human and a white cat who refused to bow to anyone, but chose to trust those who treated it with kindness. Word spread quickly through the galactic community about the humans, who had freed the last Vorthak. Some species were impressed by their compassion, others were suspicious of their motives, but all of them were curious about these strange new beings who valued friendship over power. Jiwan knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity was taking its first steps into a larger universe, and they were doing it not through conquest or intimidation, but through understanding and respect. And beside him, Beck walked confidently into an uncertain future, no longer alone, but surrounded by friends who would never try to cage its spirit again.